Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for standing by. Welcome to the Hiring Wisdom Uncommon Common Sense webinar. During the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. Afterwards, we'll conduct a question-and-answer session. If you'd like to ask a chat question during the presentation, please use the chat feature located at the lower left corner of the screen. If you need to reach an operator at any time, please press *0. As a reminder, this conference is being recorded Thursday, August 8th, 2013. I'd now like to turn the conference over to Erin Jacobson. Please go ahead.
Hello, and thank you all for joining today's webinar, Hiring Wisdom, Uncommon Common Sense. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded. By the end of the day tomorrow, you will receive an email from us, which will include today's webinar slides, recording, and information containing HRCI credits. This information will also be available at ere.net. We have had an overwhelming response on this topic, but before we get to it, I would like to say a quick thank you to Jobvite for sponsoring today's webinar. I would like to introduce Katie from Jobvite, who would like to take a few minutes of your time before we kick it off.
Hi everyone, my name is Katie Williams. I'm the Marketing Programs Manager at Jobvite, and I just want to give you a quick overview of who Jobvite is and what we do. So Jobvite is a best-in-breed recruiting automation platform, which means we only focus on recruiting and provide many different solutions and tools for the recruiting function. So some of the tools we offer are social open web sourcing and search. We help you build and manage your talent pools, which also makes it easier for you to collaborate with teammates and with coworkers. We also have incredible campaign management and job marketing functionality and offer full social referral tracking. So Jobvite basically takes you all the way through the hiring process from the beginning all the way to the end, from deep applicant tracking, workflow management, dynamic interview scheduling, and company branding with hosted career websites. Here are some of, moving to the next slide. There we go. All right, and here are some of our customers. We power many of the who's who in corporate hiring and talent pool sourcing and cater to all industries from high tech to energy all the way to healthcare. And we really do spend a lot of our time with customers like Twitter, Zappos, LinkedIn, and many more to drive our products to be all that they are. So thank you so much for letting Jobvite be a part of the webinar, and we hope you enjoy the presentation.
Thank you, Katie. We're very lucky to have Mel speaking today. Mel Kleiman is the president and founder of Humetrics, a leading provider of best practice information, training, and resources for recruiting, hiring, and retaining employees. Welcome, Mel. I'll go ahead and turn this over to you now.
Boy, thank you, Erin. I really appreciate Jobvite for sponsoring this webinar, and I'm really excited about doing it. I thought about all kinds of things in hiring wisdom, and then I thought about uncommon common sense. What are those uncommon things that we do that so often, common sense isn't that common anymore. And sometimes what we think is common sense really doesn't do it. But I began to look for a definition of common sense, and what I found was interesting. Knowledge minus common sense, or that pragmatic approach to doing something, that simple thing that you say, wow, the light went on when I heard that. That's real wisdom. Without it, knowledge just doesn't work. I think that when we look at what we're trying to do with talent management today, what are some of those little things that you hear that make the light goes on, or we look at doing things differently, and how do we make them work, et cetera. And I think literally just give you maybe a couple of examples. I was working with a restaurant group who, interesting enough, they franchise and they marinate chicken, and this is just something they do. They marinate all of their chicken for 24 hours, and they mix marinade. And they were measuring it, and they were looking for better ways to do it, and they measured this. They put this much marinade in, this much oil in, this much whatever else goes into it, water, et cetera. And they're having this giant meeting and looking for better ways to be more efficient. And somebody in the back of the room says, "Well, why don't you just draw lines on the bucket?" And all of a sudden the light goes on. And I think about making salad dressing, and we're mixing salad dressing and the oil and the water, and that's exactly what they did. Somebody drew the lines on the bucket, and they quit having to measure every time they do something. So are we looking for the common approach? Sometimes the smartest person in the room may not be the smartest person in the room. Are we looking for those pragmatic methods? And I'll come back and visit this in a minute from things that I've learned over the years in the world of hiring and recruiting and selection. What are just some of those ideas that we seem to never quite think about in what we're doing? It's like I'll give you a common problem I've been facing in my world. I happen to live on a small man-made lake, and this lake is 100% landlocked, and there's no access to it in reality. And over the last 55 years that the lake has been there, it's begun to fill up with silt, and we keep looking at how are we going to dredge this lake, and how are we going to dredge this lake, and how do we get a dredge in the lake. And then, very interesting, talking to somebody the other day, and says, instead of trying to dredge the dirt out directly through all the water, why don't you just lower the water and then dig it out and make it easy? Well, somebody had a little more common sense than I did, because it's a lot easier for us to lower the water to get to the dirt than trying to get the dirt out through the water. So just little things like that are common sense, and maybe a little bit of research. And it comes to the world of hiring. Are we looking at the best ways to recruit people and hire? We'll come back and visit that. It's I guess my favorite story, the one that probably triggered this whole presentation, and probably most of you already know this, so it wasn't uncommon to you, but it was uncommon to me. I can even remember the presentation. I can remember the group I was talking to. I can remember the woman. It made this big impact on me, and I talk about it in a later slide, but I'm going to put it in here. This woman comes up to me. We talked about referrals, and everybody out here knows that referrals are literally your best source of applicants. And she said to me, there's always a question I ask when I get a referral, and I just wonder what you think of it. And I said, well, what's the question? And she said, I always ask, is that a referral or is that a recommendation? And I guess I've told that story for every time I've done a presentation since then, and it's very rare that I find some of us who've been in recruiting for years, have been in hiring. Do we really say to people, is that a referral or is that a recommendation? And yet that's a powerful question. So it's the power of just those little things that can make a major difference in the way we're doing things, and this is what we're going to talk about today. So you begin to look at uncommon common sense, and you begin to say, okay, this is where we're going, but okay, let's look at it for a minute. Before you hire anybody, are you asking the question that we need to be asking today? And that number one question is, do we need to be doing this job at all? Or why are we doing this job? Or why are we doing it this way? Can we do this job differently? I think that this is what the technology is bringing to us in the world of human resources and recruiting and selection, is saying, okay, do we need to be doing this job at all? Well, we know we need to be recruiting. But are the job we're recruiting for, does that job to be done internally or can it be done externally? Can we bring, the whole labor movement at workforce has changed today. That so often we used to have on the staff at Humetrics, we used to have a person whose total responsibility was to write white papers. Today, there is nobody on the staff of Humetrics directly who writes papers. We've been to outsource, and we've been able to find 3 different people that we can go to and say, hey, we need a white paper on this. For example, recently we found something very, very interesting. And again, we work a lot, for example, in a specialized world of hourly employees. And if I said to you, what is the #1 hourly job board out there? Where do most hourly employees go to find a job? And I could sit here and name a different number of job boards, but it isn't Monster, it isn't CareerBuilder, it isn't Snag a Job. The #1 hourly job board out there today happens to be Craigslist. Well, I needed a white paper on how to use Craigslist to more effectively recruit and select. So we went to one of my writers and said, I need this. And a week later, they did the research and came back with a paper for a lot less than I've had to pay to somebody to do it on staff. So why are we doing the job this way? Can we do this job differently? Do we need to do this job at all? Is the questions that we're asking when doing. Why do we we could come back to hiring. Why do we hire this way? Why are we asking these questions? So ask yourself when somebody comes to you and says, okay, we need to hire somebody. Okay, what do they do? Can we do it differently? We look at when we begin to move on forward to it, and we sit there and we talk about, okay, we're going to hire somebody. Great insight. We talk about job descriptions and writing job descriptions and jobs analysis before you're going. You've got to know what you're looking for. Why would anybody want to work for your organization? I would love to take a polling question, and we don't have polling on this one, but it's rather interesting because I ask this in every webinar I do. There's the question: why should anybody work for your organization? Great question. How many of you out there have a written list of the 10 reasons why an A player should come to work for you? Do you actually have a written list that says these are the reasons that A players should come to work for you? All of us want to hire A players, but do we have the written list? And I will tell you that if you are one of those people out there that have one, you are going to be in the top 6% of all the people out there, be it Fortune's 500, be it a small company. But if you don't have a written list of the 10 reasons why an A player should come to work for you or your organization, where do you think the A player is going to get the list? So if you do nothing else but here, I'll even tell you how to draw the list. It's not difficult. It's all you have to do is make sure you go to your best people and say, why do you work here? What makes you stay? And what makes you get up in the morning? That's going to give you the list. And interesting enough, you'll find out it isn't money, as an aside. So once you need the list, but where is it? Uncommon common sense. We want to attract people. We need to have a why. Why is it always a good idea to take a shopping list and go to the grocery store? Again, when I do workshops on better hiring, I normally talk about jigsaw puzzles, and I ask what's the most important piece or part of a jigsaw puzzle. And so people talk about the corners, and some people talk about the borders, and some people talk about the last piece or the first piece. In reality, the most important part of the jigsaw puzzle literally happens to be the picture on the box. How many of us have done jigsaw puzzle without painting the picture on the box? When was the last time you truly painted the picture on the box of the person you're looking to hire? It's like going to the grocery store. What do you take to the grocery store besides money and coupons? Literally, you take the list. If you don't go without a list, what do? You spend more time, you spend more money, you buy things you don't need, you forget something you wanted, you end up having to go back. So where is the list that you're looking for in today's world? And there's all kinds of lists. I know job descriptions, but I've developed a rather interesting formula. If you want to, you can draw a pyramid on a piece of paper very, very quickly and divide it into 4 layers. And uncommon common sense says, what are those 4 things you're looking for? And number 1 is you're looking for capacity. You could call them KSAPCs, but go a little differently. Capacity. Can they physically and mentally do the job? Can they show up for work on time? What are the capacities? What are the knockouts? What is the capacity? Above capacity, and this becomes rather interesting, it's a pyramid on purpose, is attitude. We need to hire attitude. Attitude is dependable, initiative, customer service, taking responsibility, whatever it is. Above attitude is personality, and I'm sure everybody out in this group has taken a personality profiles, and many of you probably use personality testing in your hiring process. I will tell you, attitude becomes before personality. We hire, you know the line, we hire people for what they know, we fire them for who they are. But it's not a point of, you can have great customer service people who are introverts. It's attitude. Now, you look at that, I talk about personality, and all of you, and probably most of the firms out there use personality assessments. But let's take a little look at uncommon common sense. What is the difference between successful people and unsuccessful people? I would bet you that every one of you sitting on this phone is successful. I don't think your company invested money in you. I don't think you look at growing without successful. What makes people successful? No matter what the job, be it engineering, be it computer technology, be it finance, what makes the truly successful person? And there was a one-liner that came from a gentleman named Clement Stone, and he said the difference between successful people and unsuccessful people, that uncommon common sense thing was, successful people do the things unsuccessful people don't or won't do. Successful people do the things unsuccessful people don't or won't do. And that becomes, if that is the key, and I think if all of us think about it, why are you sitting in that chair? Why did you get promoted? Why did the person you placed in that job become very successful at it? What you find out is they did the things they didn't like to do when they have to do them. So then the question becomes, how many of us in the interviewing process are asking people to tell us about the things they don't like to do? Because I think we should all be adding that question into our part. Tell me about the things you dislike most in your job. And not only why you dislike them, but how do you get yourself to do them? Because that's what we're really looking for. We're looking for people who will do the things they don't like to do, will figure out the way around things to get them done when they don't, in the right way. But, we don't go grocery shopping without a grocery list. Capacity, attitude, personality, skills. The easiest thing, and there was some just really great research that just came out, which I found very interesting, which kind of shook me up. Only 11% of the time in the world of hiring, in the first year, only 11% do we let, out of a study of over 20,000 hires, do we let people go because they can't do the job. 11%. That means that 89% of the failures in new hires does not come because they can't do the job. It is because they won't do the job, or they won't do it with passion or excellence or the way we want it. I think that's so. Where do we focus our time? We focus our time on skills and capacity, and yet the real problem is attitude and fit. In fact, if you walk away with from this session with nothing else, let me tell you, there are only 3 things that we need to be determining in a hiring process. In that selection process, there's only 3 things you're looking for. The number one thing you're looking for is can that person do the job? And we just figured out 89% of the time we're very good at determining can that person do the job. The second piece that we're looking at is will they do it? I could come up with engagement, passion, enthusiasm, quality. Will they do the job with excellence? That's the question. I don't care what the job is. Can they do it with excellence? And then thirdly, not only can they do the job with excellence, but can we live together? Can we work together? That's really the key. Those are the only 3 questions that you're really looking to answer in the entire interviewing process. Now, how you get to those answers may be a different story, but they're really only the 3 questions. So we need a shopping list. Most of the people that are sitting in this line happen to be recruiters, and as recruiters, the real question becomes, okay, how do we get a true picture? Our hiring manager, how do we get a true picture of what it is that we wish to attract and hire, and how do we know the people? Again, we talk about job description and everything else. Well, one of the keys that we found that helps to get a real picture of what that person will do, and more importantly, how they will do it, is that we challenge hiring managers who need to hire somebody. We say, we have hired this person to fill the job. It's the end of the year, and we are going to give that employee the Employee of the Year award for that position. That employee was the outstanding Employee of the Year in that job, in that position, however you want to break it down. I need you to write the letter of recommendation upon what they did and how they did it to get that be nominated. I want you to write the letter of nomination telling me what that person did and how they did it, they deserve this award. When you have that letter of recommendation, you are going to have something that goes far beyond that job description. But you're going to have a real picture of what it's going to take to be an outstanding performer in that particular job. So don't go shopping without the shopping list to the grocery store. Before you recruit, you've got to ask yourself. We begin to look at the number one source of applicants. So we've got the list. We know we're going shopping. To me, and most of you probably know this, but I just want to reinforce it because it's uncommon common sense. What's the number one source of proven great employees? We know the best source of numbers in quantity and quality happens to be people who come from referral. But the number one source that is so often looked by many people is the number one source is people who have left your organization. And we all talk about boomerang employees, but people who have left. And some interesting research, and it may fit some of you, it may not fit some of you, because it totally came from hourly, but how open do we leave the door? We had a client, and I can tell you where this research came from and the finding. We had a client who hired us to do some exit interview surveys, and it happened to be in the convenience store world. And in this world, we're doing the surveys, and they had a major turnover, and the number one reason people said they left for more money. We went in to do some research. We found out that all the people, only 14% actually got more money. But they had also given us a list of people that they would like to have come back from their organizations at that point in time. And it was very interesting when we went after these people who they'd like to have back. We were able to find out that almost 20% of them would be interested in coming back. But we also found out, which was really interesting, and I'll carry this on a little later, we found out that the best time to check in with an employee who had left us, especially at the hourly work level, was within 1 week of them starting their new job. So the question being is, it paid to pick up the phone and call people who had left within 1 week and just find out how the job was going. And the closer to that time, the higher the number of people we could get come back very, very shortly. Now, why that was true, actually, I could turn around and skip all the way over to the retention slide. But I'll just give it to you because it's uncommon common sense, and I don't know how to replace it. What we found out was that people normally didn't make the first week of orientation the best week ever, and we'll come back and visit that. So number one source of great people are people who have left you. I already gave you number two. When you're looking at talking about referral, the question is that a referral or is that a recommendation? And it is amazing the difference that people make. And if it's an actual referral recommendation, you know what? We want to give it some more consideration. You look at most programs fail, and again, many of you out there have already overcome that barrier. But it is amazing to me how many of the programs fail today. One is because we don't ask for specific, narrow research in do you know somebody specifically, or do you have a contact in your LinkedIn file, or do we narrow down that specific job or network so that we can deal more effectively. The narrower you make the possibilities of that person look, the more likelihood they're going to get it. Again, the reason they fail is, what is the methodology? If you refer somebody and we hire them and they last 90 days, we're going to give you some kind of award. If they last 6 months, you're going to get some bonus. If you're going to do something else. And I always remember Psychology 101. I don't remember a lot about Psychology 101, but I remember two things. Number one thing is I remember is behavior you want repeated needs to be rewarded. And the second thing I remember is you need to reward the behavior immediately. When you hire somebody and they came from referral, you need to make sure that you're giving some kind of award, some kind of recognition for that referral up front very, very quickly, like the day they start. The second part of that is that in doing that and making it, most referral programs, how do they give the money? They send it home in a check. Well, when you send that money home in a check, if you gave away $50 or $5,000 when you sent the money home in a check, you didn't get much bang for your buck because somebody got the $500 or the $50 or the $5,000, and they had it. But if you're going to give away $50 or $5,000, why don't you give it away in front of everybody? As in saying, hey, I want to introduce everybody to Mel, and Mel is brought to us by Jerry, so we know Mel is going to be terrific. And by the way, Mel, for bringing us Jerry, you get $500. Hold out your hand and count out 5 brand new $100 bills. Why don't you have some bang for the buck? In fact, I tell most of the groups that I work with, I don't even like giving away money. I'd rather give gifts and prizes. One of my clients, very interestingly, if somebody refers somebody and they hire them, they have 5 envelopes. And a person wins whatever in the 5 envelopes. They draw an envelope, and whatever's in that envelope, they win. It's interesting to note that it's amazing how people get exactly what they would like to have. Because if you know that person would like a flat teen television set or 2 tickets to a particular show or whatever else they want, you know what? Sometimes it's a lot less money than giving money away, but I can guarantee what they're going to win because every envelope has exactly the same thing in it. But all of a sudden we're having a little bit more fun at work, and fun is what keeps people. So that's why most programs fail. And the other one that really gets me is, why do we make it so difficult for the best candidates to get into the hiring system? Who do we want to hire in today's world? Well, you know what? I don't have any prejudice against people who are unemployed, but if I could go out and hire somebody, what do I want to hire? I want to hire somebody who's working for 2 reasons. Number one, let's look at the numbers. We have an unemployment rate in this country of 7%. In many of the jobs that you out there are recruiting, we don't have a 7% unemployment problem. We have a 5% negative unemployment problem. There aren't anybody out there doing it. Okay, so the people that we want to hire are working. Why do we make it so difficult for the person who we want in our system to get into our system? How many hoops do we make them jump through to raise their hand? How many of us are saying, where is your current resume? How many of us are basing our hiring process on getting a resume into our process and system? What are resumes? Resumes are absolutely the world's most creative writing. Does it have the right words in it? Can it get through the screen? We need to look at a better method. For example, I'm working with a company that today doesn't require resumes. They've developed a very interesting IVR process that lets people get into the IVR or through the computer, but the methodology is not to require a resume. Resume means I've got to go do some work. Got to go do it. I want to hire the person. Yeah, maybe the person that I want will have one. Maybe they won't. But are we looking at what if? Just ask yourself, what if we could not have a resume to screen people? What would we do? Why do we make it toughest? I talk about resumes. I work with a trucking company and had to change the whole process. They're looking for truck drivers. Guess what they require for truck drivers? It requires a resume. Why? Why do we require resumes? Why do we make it tough for people to get into our process? Only 7% of the people out there are unemployed. And if you let's go beyond that, and you look at some research out there, of the ones working, let's make it 14%, are actively looking for a job. Now, we also know that comes to add the 7 to the 14, that's 21%. We also know that there's another little bit better than 60% of the people out there who would take a better job if it came looking for them, which is why recruiting is such a nice business, because we get a better job of people looking for them. And then that leaves roughly 20% of the people out there, no matter what you offer them, they're probably not going to go with you anyway. But the market we're looking for is not the 20%. If you do, you're looking at the small pool. We're looking for the big pool. How easy do you make it for people to get into your process? And what is the methodology? And how many hoops and how many clicks does it take? And you've all been through that kind of research, so I'm not going to take it to you. But are we taking the practical approach to making sure that what we're doing to get the best candidates into our system? And then you begin to look at the selection process. And it's interesting to, why do we tell applicants what we want them to say? I've probably sat in thousands of interviews watching people interview. And what is the number one thing we do in the interview process? Applicants don't even have to be very smart. We know we want to make applicants happy. We want to make them relaxed. You want to make them comfortable. So what is the standard conversation that we end up having with an applicant? The standard conversation that we end up having with an applicant is we sit down and we make them feel comfortable, and then we sit there and tell them a little bit about what we're looking for. We need people who understand this particular product. We need people who can deal with this kind of problem. We need people who are dependable. We need people who are reliable. We go through this whole conversation and making them feel comfortable and telling them about the job. And then what do we do once we tell them about the job? We then sit there and we ask them a simple question. What is the standard question that most of us ask? Tell me about yourself. And what do most applicants do? It's a canned question. The applicants are better at interviewing than most of us are. If you look at it, then you go, for example, behavioral interviewing, which is the #1 type of interviewing training out there today. And I'm not going to talk about how many managers aren't trained in interviewing. But behavioral interviewing is the #1 source of training in the area of interviewing today. Well, go to the web, put in the word behavioral interviewing. Go into any job board. Go to any search. You're going to get over 60 million hits on how to ace a behavioral interview today. So you have this great question about tell me time. Or we ask situational questions. What do you ask when you get a situational question? You get a situational answer. So we end up telling applicants what we want to hear. I see in interviews almost daily. It just intrigues me to no end. I see people sitting in the interview, and the first thing they do is they pull out the resume and they start talking about they ask questions off the resume. Uncommon common sense. When you got a resume, what did that applicant put on there? The applicant put on that resume everything that they wanted you to ask them. And when you start asking questions off the resume, what you did is you just gave the applicant absolutely 100% control of the interviewing process. So don't ever interview with a resume in front of you, because when you do, you allow the applicant to control the interview. He wants you to ask him, or she wants you to ask him about how they increased sales by 37% in the last 6 months. She wants you to ask them about how they handled this difficult problem, how they played part of this teamwork. We literally sit there and allow applicants to control the interview is absolutely one of the biggest problems we deal with in the interviewing process. Why do we allow applicants to control the interview? They've read the book. So what happens in an interview? You ask the question. Tell me a little bit about yourself. The applicant answers the question. What do they do next? They turn in and says, well, can you tell me a little bit more about what if you haven't told them this already, their first question out of their mouth is, well, can you tell me a little bit more about what you're looking for for somebody to do in this particular job? Or what it's going to take to be successful in this job? Or some question, and what do we do because we're polite? We literally sit there and answer the question. And we've now given the applicant control over the interview. Uncommon common sense. If there was anything that I would recommend you do in the interviewing process is you set the ground rules for the interview before you do it. And it depends on whether you have an active candidate or passive candidate on how you do this. Are you looking for somebody looking for a job? Are you looking for somebody looking for a career move? But literally you want to put some guidelines on the interview. Let me give you an example. Somebody comes to what do I want to do? I want to gather Manissa, I want to gather information from you. Then I'll tell you about the job in the company, and I'll answer any questions you may have. So I've now put control. I'll gather information. I'll tell you about the job. I'll answer any questions you may have. And we can go further. There are really two very important questions we're answering here, Manissa. One are, you right for the job, and two, is the job right for you? So I'm going to be totally honest and truthful with you in regard to respect to the job, the expectations, everything. Whatever question you need, I need you to be honest with me. I don't care if you had difficulty with a boss or a teacher. I don't care about performance reviews. I don't care what problems, as long as you tell me about them. But I need to ask about them. So you've given yourself permission to ask questions, and you've given permission to the applicant to tell you the truth. Most of us never do that. And so position people for what you want. And put yourself in control of the interview. So when somebody comes back to you and says, hey, well, can you tell me a little bit more? You say, well, I'm on page 2 and you're on page 6. Let me gather some information first. Keep yourself in control. Normally I would ask for somebody to role play this question with me today because uncommon common says, let me give you in my expectation, and I've written on a number of times, and just what is the #1 interviewing question you ask everybody? Let's see if we can get a volunteer. This would have to be somebody who's on the phone, and if there was a volunteer on the phone who wanted to answer a question or be part of this, how would they do it? Press 1-4?
Yes, if a volunteer on the phone line would like to ask a question or comment, press 1-4 on your telephone.
And the first person who presses 1-4, by the way, and answers the question, I will send a free copy of my 267 interviewing questions, or I will send my special report on the 5 most important interviewing questions you ask everybody. Have we got a volunteer? Is anybody on the phone?
If you'd like to volunteer, please press 1-4. One moment.
If not, I'll just answer the question without a volunteer, but we'll give them another 10 seconds.
We have a volunteer. Just one moment.
Oh, good. We got a volunteer. Yes.
Just one moment, please.
Okay.
And our volunteer is Mike Hardy. Please proceed.
Hello, Mike.
Hi.
Mike, so tell me, what do you hire? Or what kind of people do you look for normally?
Our company, we interview, we are a janitorial service company.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
I'm looking for people that are, like you said, have a good attitude, are reliable,
dependable, reliable, conscientious, etc. Let me give you a question outside of the one I was asking. Okay?
Yeah.
Number one question to ask people is, tell me about, in your world, would be, tell me about the hardest job you ever had.
Mm-hmm.
And what made it hard, and how long did you last at it?
Mm-hmm.
So, because you need people who work hard. And I think most of us should be asking that question, by the way. What's the hardest job you ever had? We need people who are hard. Okay, so let me give you, Mike, and it's very interesting in the janitorial world, or any world, my favorite question, if I only had one, and normally what I would do is I would tell you, I want to gather information, make you feel comfortable. Mm-hmm. And then the most important question, Mike, would you tell the group about the very first thing you ever did to earn money? What was the very first thing you ever did to earn money?
I did paper delivery when I was like 12 or 13. And then my first part-time job was at a fast food restaurant.
No, but let's go back to 13. What were you doing at 13?
Delivering newspapers.
Really? Was it a daily, weekly, night, day? What was it? Tell me about it.
It was 7 days a week. And back then you had to collect the money, too, from the people each week, too.
Oh, wow. And what part of the country were you raised in?
Midwest in Ohio.
Okay, so it never got cold and snowed or anything else, right?
No, it did.
Oh, it did?
Yeah.
So what did you do when it was cold and snow and miserable and everything else?
Yeah, just had to bundle up and get through it.
Okay, so how long did you do it for?
I did it for a couple years, and I even helped my sister, too, when she got her out and got her up and started with it, too.
So here you are, you're 13 years old, you're delivering newspapers. What were the 3 most important things you learned at 13 doing it?
About I had to be responsible for it. I was the only one that was responsible of doing it. There's no other person that could do it if I didn't, and be reliable, and the customers were expecting a service from me.
Yeah.
So if I wanted to get them to pay for the paper and for them to get paid, I had to give it. And that I had to get it done, be punctual about it too. The papers are delivered at a certain time, and I had to get them delivered, within a certain window of time.
Okay, so punctuality, reliability, what else? Anything else?
And just being conscientious and responsible.
Okay. And here you're doing, why? Did you need the money? You want the money? What did you do with the money?
It just allowed me to have extra spending money and buying school clothes, or I bought my first CD player with it, and I remember saving up for that too. And you put that on layaway back then too.
Ah, okay. And where'd you go next? Yeah. From there, you went to the. Did you like? By the way, did you like the job delivering newspapers?
Yeah. It was it was kind of my own boss.
Okay.
So I liked that, and then I went to a fast food restaurant.
Yeah.
When I was 16.
And how long were you there?
I was there for about a year and a half.
Yeah.
And then went to an office supply store.
And at the restaurant, what was your job when you started at the fast food restaurant?
I think it was a lot of doing the drive-through, doing a lot of dishes.
And when you left? Same thing or more things, more responsibilities?
More things, more responsibilities and more duties. And I was able to get a job at an office supply store too, which I thought was a step up. And
okay. So
yeah.
how'd you get? So what's the question most of us ask? The question is, tell me about the last job.
Mm-hmm.
What does everybody have a canned answer for? The last job.
Right.
Okay. And we're watching the movie backwards.
Mm-hmm.
If I wanted to, I could build the entire interview out of, and ask every great interviewing question I wanted to out of, tell me about the very first job you had, and what were the things you learned, which, by the way, nobody has a canned answer for. You know, I just asked the other day, I said some fast food was somebody's answer, and I said, where were you working? She said, at a fried chicken place. And I said, well, what are the first 3 things you learned? She said, well, the first thing is that people call up and say, you have chicken breast, you don't answer the phone. She's got a sense of humor.
Yeah.
But the point being is nobody has a canned answer, and you can talk about, you know, how did you get that job? How did you go? You know, as you said, you saw advancement going to the office supply store, and okay, tell me about what happened there and what you did. And you said at the fast food restaurant you started the drive-through window, and they gave you more responsibility. You know, okay, so what are we seeing? Is there progression? Is there growth? Is there more responsibility? So literally, if I wanted to, I could build the entire interviewing question off of just tell me about the very first job you ever had you got paid for. So it's very interesting, and nobody lies to it. And you can get great. I got fired out of my first job. You know, I had one guy said I got fired out of my first job. Why'd you get fired? Well, I didn't show up. What did I learn? I learned if you don't show up, you don't keep a job. So I've learned to show up on time. Okay, it didn't matter. He got fired. He learned his lesson. But if he was repeating that lesson 5 years later or 10 years later, then we got a real problem. So ask people about the first job, no matter what position you're hiring for, and you will be amazed at the values that you get. Now, if you'll send me an email to mkleiman@humetrics.com, I will send you a copy of 267 interviewing questions. So,
great, thank you.
For whichever you'd like to have.
Okay.
But the key is, you know, look at what we're asking. So that becomes the real key. There's other questions, but tell me about the very first job is the most important question you ask anybody. And again, I could build the others. If we're looking for a specific skill, if you're into behavioral interviewing and you want to go beyond behavioral interviewing without telling the applicant, because the problem with behavioral interviewing is, number one, we have a propensity to set up the questions for the answer, is tell me a time when you had to deal with a difficult customer. Tell me a time when you had to be a part of a team that had a problem. Tell me. So all we do is give them an opportunity to ask for positive things rather than the real story. Okay. So if you'll press 1-4, I think that will disconnect you out of the queue.
Okay. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. So what we're looking at, if somebody asked, what are some of the most important questions you ask? Number one most important question you ask is tell me about the very first job you ever had. What were the 3 most important things you learned? Where did you go from there? How did you get the job? Why did you leave that job? Tell me about the boss on that job. And then you can go to the next job, and you can go back and say, well, what was the biggest achievement or accomplishment on that job? So you can build that. If you're looking for true skill beyond behavioral interviewing, there's one particular question that you can ask, and that is, and normally they're not great questions, but it's a rating question. On a scale of 0 to 10, how would you rank yourself as a? So if you said to me, Mel, on a scale of 0 to 10, how would you rank yourself as a speaker or a presenter? And I would say, well, I rank myself as an 8. And that's a safe number. Okay, but it doesn't matter what the number is. The next question is, Mel, what are the things that make you that 8? And I would talk about in reality, my limiting factor makes me an 8, that I only spend time talking about better recruiting, selection, and retention. My specialization in how to hire the best hourly employees and the people that manage them. The fact that I developed some rather unique approaches to the interviewing process and doing that. And I don't talk about other things. Well, what would it take to become a 9? Well, probably what it takes to become a 9 is maybe a little bit better focus on training rather than information giving. Well, the standard question is, tell me about your strengths, tell me about your weaknesses, which people still use today. The problem is that everybody's read the book and they don't tell you any weaknesses. I didn't ask what the weakness is. I asked what it takes to get better. So if there was one particular question that you could ask, it'd be on a scale of 0 to 10. And you can go anywhere you want to in that particular question to break down, okay, tell me, Mel, you say one of the things that makes you that 8 is specific knowledge about better retention methods. Okay, tell me specifically what you mean by that. And I would sit there and tell you what I'm not going to tell you about. But I can take you specifically through it in depth. So you can build the entire, again, take those 2 interview questions and tell me about the first job and how do you rank yourself on a scale of 0 to 10. You get some real value into what that person is and who that person is and what they do. Don't tell applicants what they want to hear. Don't allow applicants to control the interview. We don't have to ask different questions. We have to ask the same questions looking for different answers, such as the very first job, such as on a scale of 1 to 10. Question achievement or accomplishment, and that question can be asked 2 ways. Looking about what achievement or accomplishment you've had in that job, or a different way of asking it is tell me about the best recognition you've ever received at work. What was the best recognition you ever received? What did you receive it for? If you've done great work, you've received some kind of recognition. So those are just a couple of practical ideas in the area of selection. And then when we move in selection, you begin to move into engagement, retention, and uncommon common sense. I talked about the exit interviews that we did of people who had left, and we found out that you call people back within 1 week of their new job. But let me tell you the real learning that came out of that, all that research, and it was absolutely so simple and scary. There is one question that every single employee is asked numerous times at the end of their first day on any new job, be it the dishwasher or the janitor or the nurse or the truck driver or the CPA or the customer service rep, the VP of Finance, the CEO. I guarantee you if they are a new hire, at the end of the day they are going to hear one question. And the question is, how did it go? How did you like it? Or it may be, are you going back tomorrow? That is the question. Every single one of us who's listening to this have taken a new job. Every single one of us has been asked this question over and over and over again. We know what the question is. How did it go? Do you like it? Are you going back tomorrow? If we know what the question is, then we know what the answer needs to be. And the answer needs to be, wow, this is terrific. It is the best decision I ever made. So my question to you is, how many of us make the first day the best day any new employee ever had? Or let's be more important than that and sit there and say, forget the first day. How do we make the first hour the best hour any new employee ever had on the job? And if I could give you one piece of common sense, I would tell you very, very specifically, manager must spend first hour with new employee uninterrupted. No matter what the level of the job, somebody should spend 1 hour first day with new employee uninterrupted. And especially if they work for you. And that conversation, literally, I used to say never start anybody. When do we start people? What day do we start most people? We start people on Monday morning. What's it like around your organization on Monday morning? Why would we start anybody first thing Monday morning? And that used to be my preach. Don't start people on Monday morning. Uncommon common sense. One of the gentlemen in my session says, we always start people on Monday morning, but I start them an hour early. So if you hire somebody and they're going to start them on Monday, but start them an hour early. And say, look, we normally start, Jerry, we normally start at 8, but this is your first day. And I'd really like to sit down with you, and I want to make sure we get an hour uninterrupted. So would you mind making it 7 on just this one day so you and I can have an hour together without an interruption? What do you think that person's going to feel like? And then we spend a lot of time building first-hour scripts, literally scripting what happens in that first hour. But let me just give you one really key idea that will make management easier for you from now on, in that if you'll just do that in the first hour. In the first hour, if you will sit there and say to a new employee, let me ask you a question. The most important person you manage on this job is yourself. But I think you recognize that the second most important person you manage on the job is me. How many of you out there, excuse me, have ever been told by your manager, or how many out there of you who manage other people have ever told them how to manage you? And I think that you're going to find out that most of us have never been told how to manage our boss. And as bosses, most of us have never told our employees how to manage us. Why not? Why do we make them figure it out? Why would I not sit there and say, look, in my world, it is better to ask forgiveness than to ask permission. I don't care if you make a mistake, but I do care if you don't do anything. Are we making sure that what we do, are we telling people how, if you want my attention, let me tell you, don't send me an email because it'll go in the basket. But if you really have something that's important to me, get in my face, get me away from my computer, get me from behind my desk and say, Mel, this is important. I got 15 other people hollering at me, and unless you think it's urgent, I'm probably going to ignore it. Now, that may not be a great management style, but that's who I am. That's how to manage me. Why don't we tell our people how to manage us? And why don't we do it the first day on the job? Why don't we do it the first hour on the job? Because then we get to ask another question. And that question is just as important as me telling you how to manage me. That question is, would you tell me how you want me to manage you? How many of us have ever asked the people who work for us how they want to be managed? And I'll tell you what the answer is almost every single time. The answer is, if you've got a problem, come talk to me. Tell me what the problem is and tell me what you want to do differently. Let me know. Well, you know what? That made every difficult decision or discussion I ever had to have with an employee go away, because on the first hour of the first day, they gave me permission to have the hard conversation with them. So if you do nothing else because you've listened to this session and you have people working for you, tell them how to manage you. If you work for somebody else, why don't you go and ask them how they want to be managed? Why do we have to figure it out? You only get one chance to make a first impression. So let's make sure we do it right. We could go on and tell what we need to find out and tell new hires on the first day. We need to find why. I have another question I love to ask. Why did we hire you? Why do you think we hired you over anybody else? And then I get to tell them all the reasons we hired them. I raise the expectations. So know what we're doing. And then looking at, if I could give you one last piece of uncommon common sense, PR equals ROI. What does PR stand for? That's not public relations. It's positive recognition equals ROI. What is the number one motivator in the entire world? Again, if I was doing a workshop for you, I'd probably have you write 4 words down. And those words would probably be interesting work. Well, that's actually 2 words. Interesting work, growth, opportunity, recognition. I don't know words. Growth, recognition, interesting work, family-friendly environment. Doesn't matter what the words, 4 words, as long as you got recognition in there. Money. Write down money. What motivates you? Money. Positive, Let me tell you, most people will not tell you this, but the number one motivator in the entire world is recognition. I did a workshop just the other day. I had about 200 people in it. And I asked the question, I said, how many of you in this room have ever received a written letter of recognition? Not an email, a written letter of recognition. And there were almost 200 people in the room. And maybe 10 hands went up, 11. And I went around the room and said, how long ago? And one guy said, 3 years ago. I said, where is it? He said, in my desk drawer. Somebody else said, about a year and a half ago. Where's it? On the bulletin board. I will tell you that every single person who raised their hand knew where that letter of recognition was. Could have been 5 years old. Could have been 7 years old. They knew where that letter of recognition was. Why? Because it was important. When was the last time you got a letter of recognition? When was the last time you wrote somebody else a refrigerator letter that they could take home to mom and said, wow, look at this. Look at the job I'm doing. I have Leslie, my administrative assistant. She's been with me 16 years. She's the one that taught me this lesson. Because, God, it's 7 or 8 years ago. She did this special project. I wrote her a letter. It went on her bulletin board, right in her office. And I'd walk in there, and every time I'd see that letter of recognition, 3 years went by. That letter was still sitting on her bulletin board. What was the problem? The problem was she did a lot of other great things in 3 years, and that was the only letter of recognition she got. All of us are little kids in big kids' bodies. We are recognition addicted. So we've got to look at doing that. I don't know. I think there was a particular, let me see, is there a particular question, Aaron, or that we've got if we had time for two? Or should we see what we have?
I do see a question, Mel, in the chat box from Diana. Is it necessary to ask almost the same questions to all applicants, of course with slight adjustments, so that we ensure we are measuring answers on same questions asked?
I think we need to be asking. I don't think we need to change the questions. I mean, there are certain questions that relate to kickouts. Do you have reliable transportation? Are you willing to take a drug test? Can you do this? Is there a skill level? But we don't have trouble with skill. We have trouble with ability of people to do it passionately, to live together. And I think if you deal with the questions I talk about, tell me about the very first job you ever had you got paid for, and look at the movie Forwards. If you ask about, on a scale of 0 to 10, how would you rank yourself as a? One of my favorite questions, which I didn't use here today, is one that says, ask me a question. And it does, I've been asking you a lot of questions. And in fact, in search, many times, I start my interview by reversing the process, by saying normally the process would be for me to ask you a lot of questions, etc. But you're looking to make a job move, not a career. You're looking to make a career move, not a job move. So I'm sure you've got some very specific questions. Why don't you start by asking the first question? And so let them ask the first question. And I turn around and say, whatever. And the answer, by the way, when anybody ever asks a question, my standard answer is, that's a very interesting question. Why did you want to know that? Because it's often not the question they ask, but the information of why they wanted to ask it is important. So I think, yes, you need to have standard questions. And I can use the same questions for every job that I'm looking for. I'm just looking for different answers in relationship to the question. So hopefully that helps Diane there.
All right, I think we have time for one more. A couple people just said, did you say what ROI stands for and what
return on investment?
Return on investment.
Positive reinforcement gives you greater return on investment. If you look at what do people want in a job, literally, but if you break it down, the 5 things that people really want in a job is they want a great. Number one thing they want is a great boss. I got news for you. If you got a great boss, you ain't going anywhere. It is hard to take people away from a great boss and good coworkers. The number one reason people leave is they leave managers. We changed bosses. He wasn't a good boss. But number one, they want a great boss, good coworkers. They want interesting work. They want growth and opportunity. they want, I don't like work-life balance, I want a family-friendly environment, and they want recognition. Those are the 5 major drivers. And if you want to add a 6th one to it, they want to have some fun at work. So hopefully that answers.
All right.
If anybody has any other questions, if they email me or Leslie, and she'll get them to me, or they email me at mkleiman@humetrics.com, I will be glad to answer any questions they may have. And I want to thank Jobvite for allowing me to do this and for you inviting me to do it.
No problem, Mel. Thank you for being with us today. And just a quick reminder to everybody on the line that by the end of the day tomorrow, you will receive an email from us which includes today's webinar slides, recording, and information containing HRCI credits. This information will also be available at ere.net. A big thanks to Mel for sharing with our audience today, and another big thank you to Jobvite for sponsoring today's webinar. I hope everyone has a fantastic day.
Ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude our webinar. We thank you for your participation and ask you please disconnect your lines.